Dr. Deming, I am so excited to be visiting with you. My dear friend Lisa Fisher said I had to talk to you. That the conversation would be, right up my alley. So thank you for taking the time to join. If you don't care, give us that little brief introduction to who you are.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. And so I am a radiation oncologist by training. I practiced as a radiation oncologist and healthcare leader, running end to end cancer care for one of the largest healthcare organizations in the US. And in 2020, I had an experience known as a shared death experience, which is very similar to a near death experience, but can happen to healthcare professionals who are actually at the scene where another person is dying and they can have that metaphysical experience of the light and the love and all of that. And that happened to me in 2020 and rocked my world. And I saw that what we were doing in Western medicine was not true healing. Ultimately, ended up leaving my career in 2022 and now help people heal cancer naturally.
Fantastic! Wow. So, like the pre conversation about woo wasn't left out on you, was it? Because there's so much that we don't understand, and I think that that's where that being curious and having conversations around different topics that may be outside of our bubble or our zone of comfort is so important. For me, cancer is my world. Like I want to solve cancer through all the means, right? The nutrition, building strong, resilient food systems, environment, that's really big. And so, like, the one thing that I really want to bring in and hammer down with you is that focus you have with how do you teach patients to deal with the environment? How do you walk somebody through that new cancer diagnosis? So let's get into that beginning steps. New cancer diagnosis, and you're contacted. What do we do?
Well, I think the very first thing is you want to slow everything down because the system is designed when someone is diagnosed with cancer to rush them through this process. And there's reasons for that. I understand that because I ran these programs and there are metrics that the cancer centers and the doctors are held accountable to that actually there are metrics for from the time of having abnormal imaging to getting a biopsy, from the biopsy to getting to surgery or chemotherapy or whatever it is. And so every step has these metrics that the hospital system is trying to make sure you meet because they are paid or judged, their Medicare rating is based on these stats, that they're going to want to push you through the system. And so I always tell people the first thing that you want to do is slow the whole process down so that you can make the best decisions for yourself. And then the second thing that I say is that when cancer arrives, it's a messenger. Something is out of alignment. This didn't happen overnight. And oftentimes there have been messages or signs leading up to the diagnosis that you've just kind of blown past. It's kind of like that whisper in your ear of something, your intuition is telling you something, you ignore it. And then it's like comes as a tap. And then the cancer is like the frying pan across the head of just like knocking you and saying, "Hey, something here is not right." And so I encourage people stop your world, don't just continue as if life is, you know, business as usual and just jump into whatever protocols have been recommended to you because there's a problem, there's something that caused this. And if you don't address that, then you're not really addressing the problem. And yes, there's benefits to these therapies and you can get cancer to go away, but this is why I ended up leaving Western medicine is that it's not really fixing the problem, it's treating the symptoms.
That whole gut punch, or life ambush, as I like to call it. I remember sitting in children's ER when a room full of doctors or from the hallway walked in and they told me my baby had cancer, right? Like, so like that moment is forever ingrained, and it's very easy to get caught up in the NASCAR go fast as you can, the marathon, high speeds. Let's get through chemo, radiation, surgery, do it all as fast as we can. And you don't have time to even process. And you're terrified, whether it's your a loved one or it's the individual. So the the system, incentives dictate outcomes, right? Like incentives dictate outcomes. So like we're not really incentivized to not have cancer either. So do you care to go through how you view that? Because that may sound hyperbolic to a lot of people, right? But like you didn't make any money, right, when you were practicing oncology if you didn't practice oncology, right? So you needed people to be there. So how do you view that system, and why is it fair to question it?
Yeah. Well, I think this one is hard. And actually, when I was practicing, I think that I would have seen this differently. And the way that I describe how I've come to my viewpoint now is that, yeah, I don't know who said this, but there's a quote that says, "You can't see the label on the outside of the bottle from inside the bottle."
Mm,
And when I was in practicing Western medicine, I couldn't see what it was about because I was so deeply in the system. And so it took me actually getting out and seeing it from the outside. But I'll start with kind of what the first inklings that something was wrong, and then walk you through, what I think is going on. And I do believe the system works exactly the way it's designed. It works exactly that. I used to be like, gosh, there's something wrong here. But it's like, no, it actually works the way that is designed. But my first kind of niggling that something was really wrong was in 2018. I was at a meditation retreat with a colleague, a GYN oncologist. So she did surgeries for gynecologic cancers, and I was the radiation oncologist. And we were at this meditation retreat, and the gentleman who was running it shared this story, and it's a parable of the river. And it goes something like this: that once upon a time there was a village perched alongside of a river. And one day the villagers noticed a person drowning in the river. So they sent a villager out to go get the person and rescue them out of the river. And then the next day, they noticed two people drowning in the river. So they sent two villagers out to go rescue these people who are drowning. And then the next day, there were four. And then there were eight. And then there were 16. And every day it was doubling, just at one day after another, it was just doubling and doubling and doubling. And the village became very organized. So the villagers organized themselves, became very astute at rescuing people off the river. They created these elaborate rescue protocols and systems and boats and pulleys and all this stuff. And the village elders praised the villagers for their wonderful work. And when I heard this story, I turned to my colleague and I said, "This is us. We are
mm,
glorified rescue workers on the river, pulling people out. But what the heck is happening upstream?
mm,
Why are so many people falling in the river? Younger people entering our office every day and getting, like, the numbers were just increasing. If we were doing such a good job, what is the problem that we're actually here to fix? And then, oh, by the way, when we get these people onto dry land by treating them with chemo, radiation, surgery, whatever, how do we prevent them from falling in the river again? Because, by the way, we don't even know what's going on. We tell them, genetic abnormalities account for about 5, maybe 10% of all cancers. But 90% of the time, we tell people we're not sure, bad luck. It was so disconcerting to say that over and over again every day. I don't know what caused your cancer. And so that was my first awareness of, like, oh my gosh, something is really wrong here. And then it took me time and then when I had that shared death experience, I really saw that it's like, I don't know what the problem is, but you have to leave. Like, that was the message that I got, was like, you have to leave because this is not what you're supposed to be doing, which in logical sense made no sense because I had spent my entire life training to become a radiation oncologist. I didn't finish my training until I was 32 years old. That was my first job. And here I was, like, I'm supposed to leave, but what does that even mean? Like, what am I supposed to do? But it was so strong. And I've spent so much time around people who are facing the end of their life as an oncologist that I knew the one thing that people regret at the end of their life is they'll say, "I wish I had the courage to be myself."
mm.
I wish I had been true to myself. And so I knew if I didn't follow this, that I would regret that when I was at the end of my life. And I was not going to be one of those people. So ultimately, I left. And as I left, I started studying like what makes us well, because everything that I had been taught in Western medicine, allopathic medicine, was pathophysiology. Like when something's wrong with this, they treat it like a machine, the body, like a machine. How do we give medicines to fix that problem? Or how do we replace, organs or take things out and, put it back together? But what I was really interested in is no one has taught me what a beautiful, healthy human being is supposed to look like. What creates that? And the more that I started studying that, the more that I realized, oh, the system that we're in is not about that at all. It is a sick care system. I'm not the first person to say that, right? It is a sick care system. So it's designed that when people are sick, that it helps fix things but not really heal them, not really bring wholeness back to the being and actually deal with the underlying cause. It fixes the symptoms of what is being presented. And now that I see things more clearly, I think that cancer comes down to two things. And when I say it, I usually say it's increased toxicity. We're living in a modern environment of unprecedented levels of toxicity, and then undernourishment in all the ways. So not just the food that we eat, but we're not spending time outside in the sun. We're not connecting to the earth. We're disconnected from nature, all of those things. And, Tom Cowan is one of my colleagues and friends. I join his clinic every week for his staff meetings, and he would put it more blunt. He would say, we're being poisoned and starved. And that's really, cancer comes down to this problem. And when you start to look at the systems, like who is feeding us, who is, in charge of our food supply, who is, what industry, their interest, what is their interest? And then the medical industry is collaborating with them. You get sick through the food, get sick through the things that are poisoning us, and then you have a system that can treat those illnesses, but doesn't really get rid of the underlying problem. Because if you realize the underlying problem, you would start to, deal with these issues of why are we getting so sick? And then people wouldn't be sick and they wouldn't need the system and you wouldn't feed it. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to hear that. Probably not your audience, but like, my colleagues in medicine would say, absolutely no way. That's not what's going on here. But when your whole livelihood is tied up in the financial interests of the system, it's really hard to see it clearly. And I can say that as myself, like I didn't know why I had to leave. And it's only now that I've been outside and really doing my own research. And to be honest, it's hard to find the data. It was hard to find the information, but now more people are speaking out. There's more information available. And I really think that we are stuck in a system that there are, people who make a lot of money off making us sick.
Yeah.
And also the rates of cancer from 100 years ago were like 1 in 33 people would get cancer in their lifetime. Today it's 1 in 2. And more young people are getting cancer, which is not normal.
No, it's not normal. The big thing on that information where it's harder to find is like it's not that it's not there, it's that it's been intentionally siloed and hidden. We can go back to Bernice Eddy, and when she laid out the SV40 was in the polio vaccines, right? Like, and then got completely canceled. And I believe wholeheartedly that is one of the most fundamental reasons is SV40 within this cancer epidemic that we see. I'm fully convinced on that. You go on to this whole the deeper level, I think, of what you said on the undernourished and the toxic overload is that it's an electromagnetic disaster, and that's what I believe Jack Kruse has a really beautiful picture in all this, and it's basically atavism, right? The cells regress because of electromagnetic chaos through light water magnetism, and I think that makes so much sense, and that's why so many different things can cause cancer, because it's it's like the most perfect disease. And I say that with this reverence of trying to overcome it, right? But when we figure out cancer, I think we figure out everything else. And I think that we're getting closer. But did you see cancer change in the last few years?
Yes. Well, and I do think that the SV40 is playing a role in it, but we were seeing this rise before the COVID vaccines. And I know that there's relation to other vaccines as well, but this was happening before. And I can just say from caring for over 5,000 people that this is complicated and it's not just one thing. It's a confluence of so many things that I think that it's complicated. And to say that the answer, that's why there's so many different approaches that actually work in some ways, right? Not the same thing doesn't work for everyone. So in my mind, I'm always open to looking at there's probably multiple things that have contributed to this. But cancer for sure, we're seeing more aggressive, the turbo cancers are basically we never saw those before. That was not a thing before COVID. We never saw turbo cancer and now we're seeing a lot of that. So that is one thing that's different, but I think for me, the biggest thing that is different is the younger and younger people who are getting sick. It used to be that my practice was, and I specialized in breast and gynecologic cancers. So it was mainly postmenopausal women, 60s, 70s, 80s. Those were the type of patients who were getting cancer. And now my practice is like tons of young moms, like in their 30s. And so I think that's the biggest difference that I've seen, but absolutely the turbo cancers are a whole new entity that we've never seen before.
Yeah, and the big difference between such the mRNA injections that contain the SV40 promoters, that is only part of the uh, virus, right? So SV40, for anybody that doesn't know, simian virus 40, this was the Cutter incident. Polio vaccine was cultivated on monkey kidneys that contained this virus that is an oncogenic virus. This is how we study mice cancers, is we give them SV40 and then do studies, right? Like we know this is one of the most oncogenic viruses known to man that creates cancers in mammals. So this to me is the history of this, Dr. Deming, I think has been hidden from all of us. And this is exactly why Nixon declares the war on cancer in 72, is because we knew what happened through the Cutter incident and Jonas Salk and the polio vaccine. And we knew that mesothelioma was much more related to SV40 than it was asbestos, but that was hidden, right? Judy Mikovits, she's laid this out in her very unique way. My point with that is, like, I think that rise was directly related. And I think that we are about to see another tsunami, just like we saw on that, but this one's going to be magnified because our environment's garbage and we believe the dermatologists and optometrists that the sun is bad for us and we need to hide from it. And I think the correlation there, because if you believe the story of what happened after they figured out that SV40 was there, that they utilized a LINAC, a particle accelerator, which you as a radiologist would probably understand this better than anybody else. They strengthen the SV40. They didn't eradicate it. They made it stronger. Now, this is where it kind of gets dark and deep, in that the industrial military complex wanted to turn that into a bioweapon, right? Like, this story's laid out. This is we can Google this, right? Leslie Groves oversaw this with Alton Oshner. That whole group there it's pretty nefarious. We knew this. Okay. So now we have this SV40 promoter and a garbage environment. I'm doing, reptile lights and other things, but I'm still having the non-native EMF that are affecting, biology negatively. And so we have all these negative inputs. We hide from the sun. We're not grounded. We eat processed garbage foods. All of that together, to your point, I agree wholeheartedly, is a disaster. But I think that if we don't address the elephant in the room, that most cancers, in my opinion, have this component to it, I don't think we ever make headway, because we're not looking at it to even come up with a solution for it. And so if we don't even, it's just smoke and mirrors on the whole cancer story. It's just absolutely smoke and mirrors. And it is mind blowing to me that people like Bernice Eddy and Robert O. Becker have been canceled, and we don't learn it for brilliant minds like yourself to attack this in a way that we are not doing sick care, that we're curing people.
Yeah. Well, I agree with all of it. And I think though it's intentional. And also this is part of it since I've come out in this way and I do have the credentials and I do have the experience in the allopathic medicine. The powers that be don't want MDs like myself saying that you can heal cancer without these toxic therapies and that it's really about all of these other things. Like everything that you just cited are the things that I tell my people, this is how we heal. And frankly, this is how we prevent cancer. And frankly, I would love to get upriver and,
Yes,
help people understand this so that they don't get sick in the first place. But yeah, and the other part that's hard is that until people are really impacted it personally, it
oh, good.
requires a lot of
Yeah,
change. It's a big investment in your own health to change your life and to get out of all of this toxicity that we have. And so a lot of people aren't ready, and then they won't do it until they have to. And then it could be, that they're facing their own diagnosis to finally heal themselves and clean their environment.
absolutely. My biggest platform message that I hope we get across is that we have to get the environment right. Like we just got to be in the sun. All of the biological process that the physiology of what's going on from palm seed downstream to the cleavage products. Like you know all of this, but we don't have any of that if we do not connect with nature and get in the sun. And this is so important. So it doesn't matter ivermectin and fenbendazole and methylene blue and all of the other things that potentially can have efficacy in a protocol if we don't get the environment right. So go through how you view that. How do you coach somebody to live their day to day after a cancer diagnosis?
Yeah. So we talk about circadian biology and most of my clients are getting up when the sun gets up and facing east to get that red light, and then going out for midday sun, not wearing sun obviously no sunscreen, but also no sunglasses, just so that your body can actually register that that we're in the sun, so that then you can create the melanin that protects your skin, because basically we've created this disaster of skin cancer actually by using sunscreen and sunglasses. The combination is, really, it's crazy. If you look at the rates of skin cancer, they've astronomically increased since we introduced sunscreen and this big, push to staying out of the sun. But so getting people in the sun, morning light, midday sun, evening sun as well, to get the full spectrum, having them turn off the lights in the house after dark and using candles if they can, or red, the lights like Blue Block Light Company. I think that's the one that has some nice different ones with different spectrums, that like 3 different ones that you can use at different times of day. Using the glasses, the red glasses at nighttime, and really looking around the blue light, and then also natural light, also grounding. So all of my clients are going out and grounding once a day, so those are some of the basics that we do, just as like foundation of like, let's connect with nature. We are designed as human beings to be in connection with nature and with the cycles of nature, and we totally disconnected ourselves. The other thing is with eating, we're not designed to eat all day long. Eating all day long is inflammatory, right? So we're designed to feast and then a fast. And so teaching people about fasting, I have people, doing intermittent fasting on a daily basis. And I encourage people, it doesn't always work because some people are with their family and they, want to eat dinner. But ideally, someone who's healing cancer, I would have them eat twice a day, first breakfast and then like a late lunch, but stop their eating before the sun goes down, so that when the melatonin is coming on naturally, you don't block that with insulin production by eating, after the sun goes down. So doing intermittent fasting and then prolonged fasting, 24-hour fast once a week, 72-hour fast once a month. And then I do prolonged water fasting with clients where they go up to 30 days because you can actually have cancer heal itself with prolonged water fasting. So those are some of the things that I do that's kind of just natural, and also sleeping, making sure that people are getting adequate sleep. And, I had a building biologist recently come on my show and he did a full evaluation of my house, but things that you can do with your electrical grid, to shutting off the circuit to your bedroom at night so that you're not having all this electricity running in there. And then the Wi-Fi, shutting the Wi-Fi off at night. And those are kind of the basic things that I do, is like food, and then connecting with nature and really looking at circadian biology. If you just start there, getting people eating the right food and connecting with nature and getting in the sun, you can actually really help people getting their foundation right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Two things on that water piece. Do you look at deuterium at all? Yeah.
So deuterium depleted water, absolutely, there's a benefit to doing that for people who are healing cancer. There's studies that show drinking deuterium depleted water can impact cancer outcomes. So people can have improved survival and decreased progression with drinking deuterium depleted water. I will say that it's a challenge because it's expensive, and so a lot of people push back on that, but it is absolutely one of the tools in my toolbox that I use. It's just the interesting thing is a lot of people are like, "Really? Does this make a big difference?" But there's data for sure.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal. Petra, Gavor, Shimalier, and I broke that down. Petra is one of the probably world renowned clinicians with experience using deuterium and understanding deuterium on like a whole nother level, and it's a big deal. It's absolutely crucial. But I think this is why, in large part, we have a lot of the benefits with even like a carnivore or ketogenic diet. It's a low deuterium diet. I think that you go way deeper, and it's way more important to have that local, seasonal, natural aspect, because you're getting the same light inputs that from the food as we are if we are participating in being outside nature. So I think those two things are really important. But another one that I'm curious your take is dry fasting, because that sounds terrifying. If you tell somebody to dry fast, they think, well, I'm going to instantly die, right? And so I think that part of the deuterium conversation is water is actually high deuterium. So it just, even if it's 150 parts per million, that's still a lot of deuterium if we're drinking a lot of water. So how do you look at dry fasting, and then more of that dietary approach that you have seen? Because results. That's what we're after. How do we help people?
Yeah. So dry fasting is not something that I do. So I do prolonged water fasting, but I don't do dry fasting. And actually, with prolonged water fasting that's supervised, there really haven't been any deaths that have been in people who are supervised water fasting. With dry fasting, there have been actually quite a few deaths of people dry fasting. So um, if you look back to nature, like in the ancient past, we used water fasting, not dry fasting in ancient medicine. And also with animals, when animals go into a fast, like when they get sick, what do? They go and they stop eating, but they'll still drink water. So I personally believe that dry fasting can be dangerous. And also, the other thing is you have to think about the body is a technology, right? It's a biological computer, and it requires it is water. We are water, right? 99.9% of our molecules are water, but then the electrical conduction of our whole system is important for the function. So having the minerals and the proper salts is important for the optimum function of the body. So for me, with water fasting, I think that with fasting, it's much safer, and then also you're optimizing the functioning of the body when you have the right water. And you're right that, like, I in my water fasting guide with my people who do it, I tell them that, doing deuterium depleted water would be ideal for them to be mixing half deuterium depleted water with their water or spring water. But many of them don't do it, but there's still benefits. So we still see cancer go away even with people who are drinking, deuterium rich water. assuming average 150 parts per million.
Yeah, the definitely. I'm not telling people to go dry fast extended periods of time, but you've got like the Phoenix Protocol. That there's some really interesting things in how that it's and none of it's like over 24 hours at all. Like with any of the protocols that we have seen or done, it's just incredible because I don't think a lot of people even realize that mitochondria make water. Right? We metabolize fat and turn it into water through mitochondria. Like that's a big deal. And like that metabolic water is naturally deuterium depleted. And so I think this is another aspect where we somehow have got to bridge this understanding with the metabolic water and the melanin story, this internal melanin story of the electromagnetism. Because if you listen to Seafried, it's a metabolic disease, right? Cancer is a metabolic disease. That's what Thomas says. And so it's to me so much more than that. And this is why the ketogenic diet doesn't work for everybody, because we're not taking into account the other factors. And this is a big deal, right? Like, so when you talk about sunlight, and if somebody brings up like UPE, so ultra weak biophoton emission, right? That sounds crazy because most people haven't read Roland Van Wyck's book, and they don't understand that metabolism of anything actually produces light internally. Like this is like, think of like the an octopus or a squid producing light in the water. We can see that, but we don't think that we do the same thing, but we do. And all of this is part of what controls all metabolism as well. So how do you think that we can better lay out the foundation of understanding the mitochondria in a context of this cancer role that, in my opinion, Seafried doesn't go nearly far enough?
Well, when you look at the ketogenic diet, and Seafried will say this himself, it's not a way to eradicate cancer, it's a way to arrest it. So you can basically get it to stop because you're cutting off the fuel supply of glucose, right? So flipping from glucose to ketosis, basically you're cutting off the main food supply, right? There's still glutamine, but basically you're cutting off most of it, and so you can hold it at bay. But that for me is not really, I mean, it's a good holding pattern. It's something that can hold it, but it's not actually reversing the problem, right? And so what you're describing is that you have to, and doing a ketogenic diet will help with your metabolic health, and it will help with the mitochondria. But like you described, there's so many other pieces to it. And how you described with making water, the biological water that we make, you can make that by, doing the right things. So infrared, right? So infrared is one of the ways that we create structured water in our body. If you look at Gerald Pollack's work, right? So connecting with other human beings, going out in the sun, connecting with nature, all of these things, and then eating certain foods. There are certain foods that will increase, like holy basil will increase your um, biological water that you're making, increasing the structure water in your body. And my whole approach actually is based on this concept of water, actually all of my healing, but I don't talk about it very often because most people are like, what are you talking about when you're talking about water? But when I think about healing, it's literally about cleansing our waters. We have to get rid of the toxicity because the toxicity in our cells is contributing to the dysfunction of our mitochondria, right? So you need to be doing some form of detoxification to get those toxins out. And then you need to be doing things that we used to do to connect with nature to increase our structured water in our body. We are like plants. We don't think of ourselves that way, but we are. We do basically photosynthesis in the human body, and this is the whole premise. So everything that I do, yes. So everything and I do is focused on that, is how do we get the water right in the body? And actually one of the books that I think comes the closest to talking about this in relation to cancer specifically is Tom Cowan's book, Cancer and the New Biology of Water, and talking about how, like, even with the Gershwin diet, it wasn't really about the, um, you know, what they were describing in terms of the vegan diet, the plant, it looks like it's all about plant-based, but it wasn't. It was actually about the charge across the cell membrane, and that it's really a charge problem. And that if you work on improving the water in the cytoplasm and improving the health of our mitochondria, then you achieve the same result. And so that, to me, I think that that book is a nice one because it lays this out. It's now a little bit out of date, but it gives the concepts of this, that we are walking bodies of water, and cancer really is a problem of the mitochondria, and the mitochondria relate to the water that we have in our cells. And he talks about ATP is, maybe not even energy production, but more about the water and the charge that we're holding in our cells. So
Yeah, no, I love that. There's so many different directions. So last time I talked to Seafried, I asked what he thought about Gilbert Ling saying that ATP wasn't enough to power the cell, and he said, "Well, I don't know what else would." And so, when I told Jack Cruz, he said exactly like this is where we're hitting these walls and not getting deep enough to where we're solving the problems. And water's a chromophore. Water stores light. Like that's a big part of what we have going on. So again, I go back to him all the time. But after I've done literally hundreds of these calls and read thousands of books on these topics, and so the hours that I put in, I know pretty early on where somebody's blind spots are in any conversation, and the man has got the most complete picture of anybody I have ever seen, and goes the deepest. Is there more? I'm sure. And I know Tom Cowan as well. So the I think those are the type of perspectives that are the biggest needle movers. I believe wholeheartedly, and we have been siloed in our education. And like you said, another way of saying what you said to start was you can't see the forest through the trees. Is we have been blinded because we're inside that bottle. We can't read the bottle. So my dad's a pharmacist, right? Like so, I've been in and around this world, and they're good people, but where they're inside the bottle. And I really love that way you framed it. But we're not understanding cancer as a whole anywhere near well enough to make the big leaps just yet. I'm not seeing. So where are the biggest success stories you're seeing?
water fasting.
Water fasting.
Yeah, so I didn't want to do this actually. I was super scared of it because I was like, that sounds crazy. But I have a mentor who he heals in the ancient ways, and he had brought that to me, that if you have someone fast for at least 9 days, you can get tumors to start to shrink. But if you fast for 30 days, you could take someone who has like metastatic cancer and have the cancer go away. And at first, I didn't even know that people did that. It sounded nuts to me that I was like, is that even safe? And then I had one client who, she had breast cancer that had spread to her brain, and she wanted to do a water fast. I told her about it, and she said, I'm game. I'd like to do it. And she could only do 17 days because she had a trip plan. So she had had radio surgery for a breast cancer that had spread to her brain. She had a tumor that was about 2 centimeters. She had radio surgery, and then she met me, and we did changed her diet, did all the stuff that I was telling you with sunlight and fasting, like intermittent fasting, changing her diet, and then also doing emotional work, which we should talk about this because emotions actually affect our water as well. The
Absolutely.
water, the vibration is held in the water, and our emotions affect that. But she decided to do a 17-day water fast. And at the end of the fast, she had this like just almost like a lightning bolt where she's like, it's gone. Like, I know it's gone. And also, by the way, I know what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. She had been like coaching business, like health coaches on how to run their business. And she's like, I'm not supposed to be doing that. I'm supposed to be helping people use their mind to, create change in their life that could be related to health or whatever. And so it was just clear as day. She just knew that. And when she ended up having her CT scan or MRI 3 months after the radio surgery, she went in, and the neurosurgeon was like, it's not there. And she's like, well, isn't that what you want? And he said, no, that is not at all what you expect after radiosurgery. And in fact, I have a nice slide of this that I could share with you, but basically the tumor usually looks bigger at 3 months after radiation, but it's less contrasting enhancing. And then over time, it starts to shrink, but you'll still, like even 7 years out, you'll still see some scar tissue there. And then also with radiation, you get radiation necrosis, which is dead tissue, dead brain tissue around the tumor. She literally had a pristine brain.
Wow.
Like her MRI was completely clear. There was no necrosis from the radiation and there was no tumor left. And that was my first person. And it caught my attention because I had never seen anything like that. As a radiation oncologist, I was expecting her scan to look worse, but it would be, kind of on the way to progress. But this was completely different. So I didn't start fasting people because I was still afraid of it. And I was like, well, if people want to fast, now I knew that there were fasting centers, so I'd send them there. But then I had another client about like 4 months later who also wanted to fast. And she ended up doing a 14-day fast. She had a breast cancer. It was metastatic at the time. So stage 4, it had spread to her lung a couple years earlier, but she had a new area in the breast where she had had original cancer. And the surgeon recommended a mastectomy. And I was thinking, well, if you have stage 4 in their mind, why would they want to remove your whole breast? And she didn't want to do it. And she wanted to try something natural. So again, we changed her diet, did all the things with circadian biology, did some emotional work, and she did a 14-day fast. And when she had her mammogram at the end of the fast, all of it was gone. And she didn't end up having to have the mastectomy. So, what happens when people go into prolonged water fasting is great for cancer for a couple reasons. So, within 3 days, you usually get into ketosis, which is good. Basically, that's the whole Seafried thing of like, it's a holding pattern. If nothing else, you're basically holding things back, right? But then once you get to day 4 and you're in like high levels of ketosis, because you're using those ketone bodies, you're starting to dump the fat. And what's in the fat? The toxins. This is where the toxins are stored. So you start dumping the toxins from your fat. That's why people from like day 4 to 7 have pretty bad detox symptoms like pain, or like old infections will kind of resurface and basically clear. But then once you get to day 6 or 7, the body has a mechanism to recognize, okay, no additional food is coming in. We need to prioritize what tissue to use as our fuel because it doesn't want to use the heart. It doesn't want to use the brain, right? It's going to preserve its critical organs. So the body preferentially uses diseased tissue and foreign proteins at about 6 or 7 days. And this is autophagy. We talk about autophagy. Autophagy, some level of autophagy can happen earlier, but this is like really where the body is going after and using diseased tissue as its fuel. And so that happens at about day 7. So you need at least like 9 days to get any shrinkage. But the longer you go, the more benefit you can get from that. And so now I fast people up to 30 days. And what I love about water fasting is number one, it's natural. It's like nature's way of healing our bodies, but it flips the script with cancer. So cancer, we usually think of as being a parasite on the body, and it's taking the nutrients from the body for its own growth and survival. But when someone gets past that 6 or 7 day mark, you flip the script and the body now is using the cancer as its fuel and basically ridding itself. And so it's just a very beautiful, elegant way that our body has to heal itself of many, many things, not just cancers. There are a lot of conditions that you can heal with fasting.
Right. Um, Fascinating. I love that. One thing that came to mind, just because I think you're probably the perfect person to ask about this, gadolinium. What are your thoughts around that?
In terms of what?
Detoxing, is it a big problem? Is it not a problem? Is it just part of contrast, something we just deal with? Like what are your thoughts around it?
Well, I mean, gadolinium it's used for MRIs to demonstrate cancers, right? So it can be useful as a diagnostic tool. It is also toxic to the body. So, minimizing gadolinium is definitely important. But beyond, are you talking beyond like medical interventions and like scans or?
No, I'm talking about scans. I'm just talking about like is this something that we should have a legitimate concern around when this is used in scans, and do you know how we can detox from it?
Yeah, so this is a good question that I mostly treat breast cancer, and gadolinium is not used a ton in the scans that are used for breast cancer. So most of the detox stuff that I have is for like CT scans or PET CT scans. And so I haven't thought much about this because I haven't had people, getting MRIs with gadolinium over and over again. But what I would say is that, you know, you probably don't, one of the things that people come and they ask me is they say, well, I'm going to have a scan, but should I just ask for it without the gadolinium? Should I do it without? But the problem is, then then you're not necessarily going to see what is there on that scan. Now, there are some, you know, types of MRI that may be better to do without contrast, but I think it's a tricky question because if you have something that you're treating and you're wanting to monitor the progress, it's important to compare apples to apples, right? And so having a gadolinium, the baseline scans are almost always going to be gadolinium, and then wanting to compare against that. So what I always say to people is like minimizing the number of scans and finding out, okay, what's the least amount of contrast that they can use. And then I don't have a specific protocol for detoxing gadolinium specifically, but I absolutely would do that. If I were to have a scan that had gadolinium, I would be doing a detox from that.
Yeah, uh, it's honestly, it's not been very promising in what I have seen on getting it back out of the body. And so
Yeah.
the only thing that I feel like might be pretty solid at exploring more is C60. So and that has the whole graphene oxide scare attached to it. So like there's, I don't have a good solution. So I was just curious as if you did. The fasting, great. I wonder if you have seen a difference between somebody that does a long form fast that does listen to you about the sun and getting outside versus not.
Well, I haven't seen that specifically to say whether, someone who fasts but doesn't get out in the sun, whether or not there's, you know, that makes a difference because most of my people they're getting outside. So when we do our noon
Good,
call,
good.
most of them are sitting out on their, grass doing the call outside because that's what I tell them to do. So it's hard for me to assess that because I'm recommending it.
Yeah, good. I would imagine there's a substantial difference. Just based on, gut feeling. I'm glad that so many people are listening to you. That's incredible because like I am called an absolute wackadoodle because I say get out in the sun, right? You're going to give everybody skin cancer. Well, I'm also for raw milk and for ivermectin being over the counter, right? Like we got those laws passed in Arkansas. And so like it is wild to me the conditioning that we have that we don't question and we don't think somebody else's sovereignty or freedom is something that should happen. Like, so even if I do want to get your take on it, but like, even if you did not want to take ivermectin, if you had a stage 4 cancer diagnosis or me, why are we not allowed to make that decision for ourselves? You know, it's
Yeah, well,
wild to me.
I there's so many things where you're like, this is a very old drug. This is very safe. Like it's been around forever. We use it, like for scabies and these other things, and never ever any concern. But then, I mean, but you have to, right? During the beginning of COVID, when all of the fields where this is being grown, the plants that have the active ingredient are basically being destroyed. There's obviously people who don't want people to have these safe, inexpensive medications, right, that are effective. So I think that I don't know what that is exactly, but there are definitely people who don't want that in the hands of people, but it's safe, it's effective, and frankly, you can get it. Like even if it's not over the counter, it's over the counter in certain states, and then you can get it through mail order. But the thing that drives me crazy is that it's expensive,
It's insane.
like insanely expensive for this dirt cheap drug. So now, these companies thank goodness there are companies who are making it and making it available, but they're making a killing off of really cheap drugs. So that to me is just frustrating.
Yeah, so we just got that passed this year for ivermectin over the counter, and it's hardly in any
Pharmacy.
retailers or pharmacies or anything to where you can get it. And the ones that are astronomically priced. It is insane. And so honestly didn't expect that. I thought all the prices would go down because we'd have more availability to it, and it's been the exact opposite. So it was extremely safe. I just had Nicholas Holscher on, who is Peter McCullough's epidemiologist for the McCullough Foundation, and he went through some of the studies that they put out. And have we been lied to about everything?
Yes.
It's crazy, isn't it? And it's like once you
Well, I
see
think
that,
that's the hard part. That's why I think most people don't see it, because once you start to see it and you realize everything has been a lie, it's hard to wrap your head around, like, how do you reconcile that, right? And then what do you do? And then it feels like, oh my gosh, well, I'm just doomed because we're, being poisoned, and nobody really wants us to thrive as human beings. So yes, I think we've been lied to. Absolutely.
it does get depressing at times, but I think that comes when we are expecting somebody else to come save us instead of picking up the torch, so to speak, and putting in the work ourselves. It all starts with that person in the mirror. We need to be healthy. We need to prevent what we're sitting here talking about. For one, we need to know what the cause. That's why I keep bringing up SV40 and sunlight, right? Because to me, I think those two things are the most important things we need to know and understand and apply. But nobody in Washington's going to save us, right? Nobody's coming to ride in on a white horse and make all our woes go away. So the more we sit back and we quote unquote trust the plan and all the other nonsense versus just put in the work and make things better for ourselves and then our family and our community, then it ripples out from there. Nothing's going to change. Absolutely nothing. It's going to be the same song and dance. It's going to be packaged a little bit different. So what what parting advice do you have as we go through that? Because I hope that big takeaways that there's a lot of things we can do.
Yeah, I think that there is so much that we can do, but first you have to see the problem, which that's what you're doing is you're sharing, okay, these are the issues. Like this is stuff that, these are the reasons why we are getting more and more unhealthy as a population, and that you don't have to be that statistic, but it requires radical responsibility, radical changes in the way that we live our lives. And I think we've been conditioned, just like everything else has been taught to us is not truth. This idea that convenience, that life is supposed to be convenient, and that we're creating the ideal is to create this life, this perfect life where everything is, you go to school and then you get married and you have your 2.5 children, and it's like everything is perfect. That's a lie. So like when you start to realize that it's not supposed to be that. This is like a challenge. This is like planet Earth is a place of challenge. We, are here as humans to learn. We're here to grow and to evolve and to learn lessons. And that if you look into the world, if you look at these statistics and you're like, I don't want cancer, then you know what? You have to change, because change is the only way. If we keep doing the same things that we've been doing and trusting the government and trusting the food that has been, packaged for us and said that this is the way that we're supposed to eat, you're going to get sicker. And so it's listening to the voices like yourself that are sharing the truth. And the beautiful thing is, and my mentor always says this, that they can't cover the sun with one finger forever. And that's what we're starting to see, is that people are showing that, they've been blocking the sun, and literally actually, but they have been blocking the sun, and you can't do that forever. People are waking up and starting to see it, but it requires radical responsibility and it requires change to create something different, which, what we're creating as a society is a society, an epidemic of unhealthiness. People are really unhealthy, and you have to change if you want to create something different.
Love that radical responsibility. I think I love that. That's so great. One more thing I meant to ask you about this before we wrap up is: have you utilized cold therapy in anything? And then if
Yeah.
well, so how why? Kind of in a nutshell, is that something that we need to even consider?
Well, this is an interesting point because actually with people who have cancer, I don't always use cold therapy because it can be too much stress on the body. When someone is very sick, you actually can stress the body with cold therapy, but that stress can be helpful, right? So you're releasing these proteins from the liver that basically stimulate repair in the body. And so it can be very powerful and healing, but not always the right choice when someone has cancer. And so I'm cautious about it. But yeah, using, saunas for detox and then cold therapy and combining those is really powerful for healing in the body and then also for our mitochondria.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tom Seeger is a friend, and he has Morosco Forge is his company, and he's done a lot of incredible work. We just had a conversation on autism that tying that into Doug Wallace has done a lot of really good work around mitochondria and heteroplasmy and trying to understand what's going on there. And that goes back to the water story, right? So as our mitochondria ages, it produces less of this metabolic water. And so all of it is so unbelievably complex and huge picture, but it's beautiful, and it gives me a whole new appreciation for what I believe God created. And I think it's absolutely incredible. And I just I'm thankful that there is a lot more people like you than I think a lot of people realize. At least ones that maybe question how they've done things and they just want to help people. So thank you. And again, I think there's so much hope.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for all that you do spreading accurate information.
Thank you. We try and always learning and been
Yeah.
wrong plenty.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing is like, but that's, I think, the willingness to be wrong, but to be learning, to be pushing the boundaries to see, okay, what makes sense.
Yeah.
So I appreciate everything that you do.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.